I'm Nathan and welcome to Stories with a Twang. I have 4 exciting stories for you today to celebrate the 100th episode of Stories with a Twang, so sit back and relax. The first episode is called I Think I've Been Marked by Taba of the Gale. I never used to believe in omens or signs until those 3 nights that changed everything. It began innocuously enough with a subtle disturbance in my otherwise mundane routine. It was a warm summer evening when it started. I lay in bed, drifting on the edge of sleep, my phone resting beside me like a faithful companion. The room was dimly lit by the glow of the street lights filtering through the curtains. Suddenly, a gentle buzz interrupted the silence. I glanced at my phone, bleary-eyed, and saw a message notification. Dismissing it as inconsequential, I rolled over and tried to return to sleep. Yet, as I closed my eyes, a single red slash briefly marred the screen before vanishing into darkness. I blinked, attributing it to tiredness playing tricks on my eyes. Brushing off the unease creeping into my thoughts, I eventually succumbed to sleep's embrace. The following night unfolded with a different unsettling occurrence. A faint, rhythmic knocking echoed through the room, like fingertips tapping on glass. Startled awake, I searched for the source, initially fixating on the window above me. However, the sound seemed to emanate from the direction of the mirror mounted on the opposite wall. Heart racing, I approached the mirror cautiously, half expecting to find something inexplicable staring back. To my relief, or perhaps disappointment, there was nothing out of the ordinary. I laughed nervously, chiding myself for letting my imagination run wild. Yet despite my attempts to rationalize, sleep eluded me that night. The third night shattered any semblance of normalcy. Abruptly awakened by a deafening crash, I bolted upright. The mirror had inexplicably tipped over and shattered into 1,000 glittering shards upon the floor. Instinctively, I leapt out of bed, bare feet meeting a cruel surprise, a shard of glass slicing through my skin. Cursing under my breath, I gathered the pieces of the mirror and disposed of them, trying to ignore the unnerving sensation that someone, or something, had been watching. As I cleared away the last fragments, a chill ran down my spine, and for an instant, I could have sworn I glimpsed a pallid face staring back at me from one of the shards. Shaken but determined to regain control over my nerves, I returned to bed, hoping for respite from the inexplicable events. Yet my phone buzzed once more, shattering the fragile illusion of normalcy I desperately clung to. Irritated and sleep-deprived, I reached for my phone, intending to silence it once and for all. But when I tried to turn it on, the screen remained stubbornly dark. Frustration mounting, I tapped the screen repeatedly, pressing the buttons all in vain. Just as I was about to resign myself to the night's restlessness, 3 crimson slashes materialized across the screen, stark against the lifeless black. Before I could comprehend the horror unfolding before my eyes, a spectral hand emerged from the depths of the screen, a clawed, pallid hand that reached out with unearthly grace. Frozen in terror, I could only watch in disbelief as it swept across my throat in a chilling caress. Gasping for air, I awoke with a start, drenched in a cold sweat, heart pounding in my chest. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic buzz of my phone. Trembling, I picked it up, hands shaking as I unlocked the screen. There were no messages, no missed calls, just the faint glow of the screen illuminating my trembling fingers. As realization dawned, a chilling certainty settled in my mind. Whatever had haunted me in those restless nights was no mere dream, and as my phone buzzed once more, the air thickened with an unspoken dread. I didn't dare look. For in that moment, I knew that whatever had marked me with those red slashes was still watching, still waiting for me. The proof came the next morning when I hesitantly reached for my phone again. The device, which had been dead the night before, now powered on without issue. My heart raced as I navigated to the photo gallery, praying for some explanation. There it was, a single haunting photo time-stamped from the previous night. The image was dark and grainy, but unmistakable. A pale, clawed hand reached out from the screen, frozen mid-swipe. The 3 red slashes were visible on the glass, exactly as I had seen them. Our second story is called My Roommate Let Something Into Our Apartment, and I Don't Think It's Gonna Leave, by Michael Marks. I'm not exactly sure where to turn with this. Paranormal forums have been no help, and most places on the internet just start talking about salt, iron, and calling Sam and Dean to fix the issue. This is real though, and it's getting worse, and I'm terrified. About a week ago, I came home late from work at my usual time. I usually get off around 10:30, and my roommate Jackson works pretty early, so it's not uncommon to see him passed out on the couch. That night, though, he was wide awake, sitting and watching a scary movie with the lights off. I greeted him and tossed my keys on the table, but as I went to reach for the light, he turned and yelled at me, "Leave it off!" I jumped back, startled. "What the hell, man?" "Sorry." He settled back on the couch, his eyes turning toward the screen again. "We're just trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie." I looked around and didn't see anyone else in the room. Tension filled the air. "Who's we? You got a mouse in your pocket?" I joked, hoping to lighten things and make it feel normal again. Instead, he turned to me with wide, glassy eyes and corrected himself. "Me, I'm trying to enjoy the atmosphere of the movie." He slowly turned his head back toward the screen where some mass killer was stalking his victim. A combination of the intensity in his eyes, the dark room, the scary movie, and the way he'd reacted to my arrival sent a shiver up my spine and put a sick feeling in my stomach. "Whatever, man." I tried to shake it off. "See you in the morning." I walked away toward my room, but he didn't respond. His eyes glued on the screen as he silently watched the movie with a stiff-backed posture. I turned back to him one last time before I shut my door, and I swear I saw something out of the corner of my eye standing next to the couch. I did a double take and it was gone. Instead, I noticed Jackson had turned his head toward me. His eyes were still glassy and his mouth stretched itself into a toothy smile. I quickly shut my bedroom door and locked it. I flicked on my TV and put on some random YouTube videos to hopefully distract me from what I just saw. Was he messing with me? Trying to scare me? What the hell had just happened? Jackson had always been a bit of a prankster. One time he hid the vacuum in my room and set it up with an electrical switch on a timer. Damn thing went off at 3 in the morning and scared the shit out of me. That was funny though. This was not. I spend the rest of the night lying in bed and staring at my TV with the bizarre smile imprinted on my brain. I thought about getting up and confronting him, but before I knew it, I heard the TV shut off in the living room and him go to his room and close the door. Any expectation I had of him coming to my door, knocking, apologizing, and explaining what the hell had just happened died. Instead, I decided to try and get some sleep and ask him in the morning. Sure, it was weird, and yes, it creeped me out, but at the time, I didn't realize I was living in what would become a nightmare. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt and shrugged it off. I can hear you wondering why I didn't just book it right then and there, but the guy had been my roommate for 3 years and barely with any issues. He was a nice dude with no history of anything weird as far as I knew, and it was so much easier to assume it was a strange night and my eyes and brain were playing tricks on me after a long night at work. I convinced myself it was a badly timed joke on his part, and in time I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to find Jackson sitting at the table eating a bowl of cereal and scrolling on his phone. I could smell coffee brewing in the pot. "Morning, dude," he said in his typical cheerful tone, not looking up from his breakfast. "Made coffee, help yourself." "Morning." I side-eyed him as I walked through the kitchen, and finally he caught my gaze. "What?" He shot me a confused look and shrugged his shoulders as he spooned some more cereal into his mouth. "Last night, dude. Not funny." I couldn't believe he was playing stupid with me. "You actually freaked me the hell out." He laughed and shook his head. "Sorry, man, I was just screwing with you. I guess the horror movie put me in a mood." I actually remember breathing a sigh of relief. I had figured he was messing with me, but hearing it confirmed made me feel a lot better. "I don't mind a prank now and then, man. Just save it for when I'm not exhausted." I poured myself some coffee and started heading back toward my room to try and relax during my day off. "You got it, brother." He raised his bowl to me in a cheers and smiled a normal smile, but as I walked away, I heard his tone change and lower to be almost imperceptible. He spoke words that once again filled my gut with ice. "We'll try to be more considerate next time." "What did you just say?" I turned to him again. "Me?" he said with a mouthful of cereal. "Nothing." "You definitely said something," I insisted. "Dude, you were being weird as hell." He got up and put his now empty bowl in the sink. "Listen, I'm sorry I messed with you last night. I promise I didn't say shit though." Again, I know what I heard, but he was convincing as hell. It was easy to trick myself into thinking I was psyching myself out. There was no reason the guy would be gaslighting me. At worst, he was just messing with me, and if I told myself I just needed to let it go, everything would go back to normal. "I guess I'm just still tired and a little tweaked out from last night," I said to him. I sipped my coffee and headed toward my room again. "Sorry, man." "No worries," he said, heading toward his room as well. "Sorry I tweaked you with my joke." I thought that would be that, but 2 nights later, things got way worse. I woke up at about 1:30 to the sound of scratching at my door. It was like a dog begging to be let in, despite the fact that neither Jackson or I have a dog. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and stared at the door with an intense focus. The sound continued. Small scratches, short and quick. It made me think a bit of scurrying rats gnawing on support beams in the walls. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could and got closer to the door. I pressed my ear to the wood and could feel vibrations of whatever was scratching on the other side. "Jackson?" I called out, unsure if I was expecting a response. "What's up, man?" I heard him right away, but not next to the door. He sounded like he was in the living room. I flung the door open to nothing. Moonlight crept in through the window and cast an eerie blue over the apartment, but Jackson wasn't there. No rat, no dog, no roommate, nothing. Nothing to have made the noise and no one to have called back to me. Maybe I should have been scared, but honestly, I was irritated. He was still trying to mess with me and I just wasn't in the mood. I walked across the hall to his door and knocked on it aggressively. "Jack!" I almost shouted, but thought better. I kept my tone firm and knocked again. "Jack, what the hell, man?" Silence. I pressed my ear against his door. "Jack?" I said again in a softer tone. He didn't respond. I tried his knob and his door wasn't locked. As I turned the handle, this creeping dread filled me that something awful was waiting for me on the other side of the door. "Hey man, are you alright in there?" I slowly pushed the door open, and as the room slowly came into view, I saw Jackson sitting on his bed with his back to me. His posture was stiff like before while he was watching the movie. Hands on his knees, his body still as a statue. "Dude, what the hell is..." My words caught in my throat as the rest of the room came into view. I still can't fully believe what I saw standing there. A figure stood next to Jack, tall, I would guess almost 7 feet. A sheet was draped over it like an old ghost costume, but without the eye holes. Just a white sheet with what looked to be a person underneath. "I'm fine," Jackson spoke, but not alone. The thing underneath the sheet spoke with him in unison, its gravelly, rotten voice tangled with his. "I'm just hanging out with my new friend." I almost screamed, but I was so scared that at that moment I was frozen in place. Something about this made me realize that this was no joke. The thing under the sheet gave off the worst air of danger I'd ever felt in my life, like staring down the barrel of a gun. "He came knocking the other night." They both spoke, the thing just a half second before Jack though, like it was guiding his voice. "I let him in. He likes it here, so warm and inviting." I backed away slowly. A terror filled me and told me to flee. I felt like if I ran, it would chase me, like locking eyes with a predator in the wild. "We can all be friends now, the best of friends."
"Jackson says you're easy to scare."
It was speaking alone now.
"Show me."
With that, it moved across the room, and then it was directly in front of me. It didn't walk or run. It was like it was fast-forwarded. Startled, I stumbled backwards and into the wall behind me, cracking my head on a framed picture. I scrambled to my feet and looked up. Jackson was once again wearing that stiff smile and standing next to this intruder. "Come on, brother," they said together. "Let's all watch something scary." The sheet lifted ever so slightly and a gaunt gray arm slid from underneath. Thin, bony fingers reached for me and snagged the collar of my shirt as I attempted to bolt down the hall into the front door. I heard the fabric rip as I tore myself free and sprinted through the exit. "We can all live here together. No need to run." The voice got muddier, uglier. It sounded like it was underwater and distorted, shredded vocal cords. I flung open the front door and flew into the hallway. The hall lights burned my eyes for a second as I ran to the stairs. All around me at every apartment door I heard knocking as I tore my way down the hallway. I saw some people opening their doors to find out what was going on. Each of them went blank as soon as they did. I watched some of them fling the door open, ready to scream at whoever was knocking so late, but their expression dropped and their eyes went as glassy as Jack's. I jumped down, skipping 3 to 4 steps at a time, my bare feet slapping against the cold vinyl floors of the building's hallways. More and more doors opened, people standing frozen at the threshold, and those tall sheet-covered entities standing next to them. Some were guiding them back into their homes, some just watched as I moved as quickly as I could down the hall. I burst out through the front door into the warm night air. I must have ran 3 or 4 blocks before the realization hit me that I was in my pajama pants, no phone, no wallet, no keys, no shoes, and no idea what to do. I ended up finding an all-night diner that let me use their phone. I thought about calling the cops, but what do I say? Ghosts have taken over my apartment building and the residents are hypnotized? Possessed? Nothing I could say wouldn't sound insane. I would get treated like a crackpot. I called my sister. I wasn't even sure what to say to her. I told her something was wrong with Jackson. He was acting crazy and I was not comfortable staying in the apartment anymore. I've been here for 3 days now. I don't know what to do anymore. At the urging of my sister, I called the police to do at least a wellness check on Jackson. I was terrified of sending anyone in that apartment building, but they told us they checked on him and everything seemed fine. He answered all their questions normally, told them he had pulled a bad joke on me and he was okay. This was not a joke, and I feel like I'm going crazy. My sister Ashley and her husband are urging me to just go home and talk it out with him, or at least get my things. I don't know what to do, though. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Our third story is called Asylum Mind, and it is by Never You Mind Who, and it is going to be read by the fabulous Elizabethisafraid.
I suppose my grandfather had eccentric tastes. The place he called home near the end of his life was a somewhat disturbing property that would surely freak out most people. It was a former insane asylum. Despite its off-putting past, he talked about it like it was the most luxurious mansion you could imagine. Instead of being creeped out by it, he was proud to own such a historic old building. He bought it for a very good price, but spent quite a bit on restorations. When he passed away, I was stunned to discover that he left the building to me. A few members of the family were a bit insulted that he gave it to me over them, but most were so unsettled by the place that they didn't mind. I guess I really was his favorite granddaughter. I drove up one day to take a look at the place, tour the building, and decide what I was going to do about the fact that it had recently come into my ownership. At first I thought there was no way I'd ever actually move in. Arriving at the property, I was confronted with the sandstone monstrosity. The building was tall, towering over the landscape, with ornate windows and Gothic architecture. There was a circular water fountain in the front and a large clock tower at the entrance. Inside, there were several long, empty hallways. My grandfather had renovated the opening interior room into a living room and had rearranged things quite a bit. He had changed the doctors' and nurses' areas into his lavish bedroom and guest rooms. The kitchen was fully redesigned with expensive granite countertops. In one room, there was even a pool hall. He had really turned this grim asylum into his own personal manor. I was somewhat impressed. At the time, I still lived in a cramped apartment, so this was certainly an upgrade as far as space was concerned. I was pretty hesitant, but eventually I decided to sell my apartment and move in. It might be a bit creepy, but it was much nicer than the place I'd been staying in, and there was no way I could pass up all that space. It's wise not to look a gift horse in the mouth, I suppose. It took some time to get used to, and heating the place was a nightmare. Whenever I'd walk through the hallways, it'd be freezing cold. However, the bedrooms and other rooms I could heat with fireplaces and heaters. After a while, I stopped seeing it as an asylum and saw it more and more as just a nice house that my loving grandfather had graciously given to me. I was appreciative. This next part is a bit difficult to describe, but I guess it's relevant. I've had mental health issues all my life on and off. They tend to get worse during periods of high stress, and shortly after my move, I started having a lot of issues at my job and with a few of my relationships. I became very paranoid as a result. I was convinced that someone was poisoning my food. Even when I was self-aware enough to know it wasn't true, it still bothered me and kept me from eating for several days. I felt like I was having some sort of psychotic breakdown. Eventually, I sought psychiatric help, and after much assessment, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. I didn't have any auditory or visual hallucinations, and with the aid of therapy and medication, I was able to keep my symptoms in check and manage it. The irony of living in a former insane asylum at the time wasn't lost on me. My friends morbidly joked that maybe the building was what did it somehow, but of course, I'd had a history of such mental health problems all throughout my life. Thankfully, this was the 21st century, and I was able to receive proper treatment, unlike many of the poor folks who had lived their lives in the former asylum that I then called home. It was also a less taboo subject, something to be discussed more openly instead of locked away behind the gates of hellscapes like an insane asylum. Patients were once stored away from society like a dirty secret and subjected to what would now be seen as horrible medicalized mistreatment. This grim history was all around me and only drove home the point for me what progress we had made as a society and how grateful I was for it. Then, something most peculiar happened. One night, I was heading to the kitchen to get a midnight snack. I had a blanket wrapped around me while traveling through the cold hallways. While making my way there, I noticed unsettling movement in the distance. The hallway I was in had tall wooden doors along either side, with each one leading to a small room that the patients once stayed in. When I looked towards the source of the noise, I saw a human figure walking out of an open door. The figure moved down the hallway before disappearing through another open door further down. The figure was as plain as day, a person standing there like you or me, not transparent like a specter in a movie. It was an eerie woman wearing an old-fashioned white nurse outfit. She looked like something out of an old black and white photo. I felt the threatening feeling that a mysterious stranger was in my house. I stopped dead in my tracks. The mind is a weird thing and can play tricks on you. I would know that more than most. At first, I took what I was seeing at face value, but when I thought more about it, I wondered if it could be a product of my mental illness. I'd never had visual hallucinations before, and I'd been taking my medicine. Could I really be seeing this? I thought. Cautiously, I took a few steps forward in the cold, dark corridor. As if on cue, the nurse emerged from the door at the end of the long hallway. This time, however, she turned and faced towards me, staring blankly. Her piercing dark eyes gazed into me. This made my skin crawl. The woman's uniform was a white dress, shoes, and hat. Her skin was ghostly pale. Her short hair was dark brunette. She looked at me for quite a while before a wicked smile began to slowly appear on her face. We both stood, transfixed, staring at one another for a moment. Something about the way she was looking at me was very sinister and intimidating. She appeared to be holding an odd, shiny silver medical instrument in her hand, but I couldn't see what it was. The nurse then began walking towards me. In a panic, I ran back into my room and slammed the door. I stayed awake all night. There was no way I was sleeping after that. I waited for daylight. In the morning, I nervously peered out the door, but saw nothing. It took hours to gain the courage to investigate the hallway in the daylight, only to find absolutely nothing. No one was there. After that horrible night, I started storing snacks in my room to avoid the empty hallways where I saw the nurse. I still wasn't sure what she was. Given the history of the building, I thought she might be a ghost, but with my recent mental health crisis, there's no way I could be sure. One morning, I was brushing my teeth in the bathroom mirror, trying not to think about what I'd been going through. I suddenly got the uncomfortable feeling that I was being watched. In the mirror, I saw the haunting figure gradually appear behind me out of nothing. With sudden alarm, I dropped my toothbrush and turned around to look, but she was gone. That's when I became really convinced that what I was seeing was a spirit of some kind, but that conviction was hard to hold on to as the days went by. I couldn't trust my own mind to be giving me accurate information on what I was seeing. I just didn't know if this was part of my condition somehow worsening or not. I wasn't sure which answer was more frightening, that my illness had now resulted in vivid hallucinations, or that an asylum spirit was pursuing me. Then, I started seeing her during the daytime more and more. Sometimes it'd just be for a moment, or out of the corner of my eye. Other times, I'd see the ghostly nurse going in and out of rooms doing her busy work. She always seemed to catch me off guard. I started closing all the doors, but somehow I'd find them inexplicably open again. The door physically moved. That couldn't be the result of a mental health issue, I thought. Then again, maybe I didn't actually close those doors, but just tricked myself into believing I did. Sometimes, late at night when I was getting ready for bed, I'd hear the sounds of her nurse shoes walking on the tile flooring out in the hallway. I'd shudder as she grew closer and closer. If she was a spirit, I wondered what she wanted from me. After weeks of being plagued by her mysterious and threatening presence, I decided I had to see my doctor and tell him about this. I told him that I'd been experiencing what I believed to be visual hallucinations. He increased the dosage of my medication in hopes that it would help. It didn't. I continued to see the ghostly woman in the hallways or throughout the building as I tried to focus on my daily life. I'd see her again and again. She just wouldn't go away. Nothing could make her leave. I'd yell out to her in empty rooms, asking her what she wanted from me, or pleading with her to please stop and leave me alone in peace. She made no reply. Then, one night as I was sleeping, I grew restless and began to toss and turn. Suddenly, I found myself awake in the dark room. My eyes strained in the darkness until I could make out what I was seeing. my bedroom door, which I had locked, was wide open. The nurse was standing at the foot of my bed looking at me as if I was a patient in her care. Terrified, I screamed, threw the blankets off of me, and ran out of the room. I made my way alone through the chilly hallways to the kitchen and flicked the light on. I stayed in the kitchen all night, guarding the door and looking around the room nervously, waiting for her to spontaneously appear somewhere. I knew I locked that door. With my dosage already increased, any notion that this was a product of my mental illness went right out the window for me. I needed to research the property more to see if there was any way to figure out what I was dealing with. I knew my grandfather had a binder of information he'd collected on the old asylum. He'd mentioned it to me before, I just needed to find it. I spent the day digging through storage until I finally uncovered it in an old tote at the very bottom of a stack of cardboard boxes. The binder was full of newspaper clippings and documents about the place, from the time it was being built until the time it was being closed down and sold. There were even letters and correspondence between staff within its pages. I learned about the grisly history of the asylum and about the poor treatment and dehumanization of the patients there. In order to calm patients down, sometimes they'd put them in ice baths, where tubs were filled with ice to get them to calm down. They also did electroshock therapy on supposedly unruly patients. But the worst of all was the many horrific transorbital lobotomies, which were done with tools resembling an ice pick and hammer. Lobotomies were once considered a helpful form of treatment for various mental illnesses, including schizophrenia, OCD, depression, anxiety, and violent outbursts. Sometimes the patient's relatives just simply didn't want to deal with them for whatever reason, and so they had them committed or lobotomized. Anyone deemed abnormal was at risk. Sometimes this was an easy way for a husband to get rid of his former wife. The procedure essentially resulted in permanent brain damage to the prefrontal cortex and left the patient as a zombified shell of their former self. A steel ice pick was stabbed just below the eyelid into the thin bone inside the eye socket. The end of the long silver ice pick would then be struck with a small medical hammer until the pick cut into the brain tissue. The pick was then moved around from side to side until it severed the frontal lobe's connection to the thalamus. Their personality, their self, and their ability to make rational decisions were forever destroyed. Sometimes the patients were wide awake during these procedures, and sometimes they died from brain bleeding. The patients were left with vacant expressions and severely blunted or reduced emotions. The doctors found them to be more obedient and claimed to have fewer issues from them. Lobotomies continued in the medical field until around the late 1960s. It was perhaps the worst thing you could do to someone, like killing them but without killing them. I soon learned that there was a nurse there who was legendary for the amount of lobotomies she'd given. Her name was Amelia, and if the letters are to be believed, she was not the nicest of people. I was horrified when I turned the page and was met with the photo of the very specter that had been haunting me, standing outside on the building's front steps with the other nurses. Looking into her dark, hateful eyes, I was sure it was her. Every detail matched. The spirit I encountered was the cruel nurse Amelia who worked here in the early part of the 20th century. Not wanting to be alone or in the building at all after reading that, I asked a close friend of mine if I could come over to her place. I explained some of what I was going through to the extent that I could without seeming too off-kilter. Being a true friend, she agreed that I could stay over for tonight so I wouldn't be so frightened. I wondered how expensive a long hotel stay would be until I could figure out somewhere else to live. I arrived at her house and we talked in the living room for a while. I showed her the binder and told her what I was experiencing. It was nice to have someone to talk to, and she made me feel much more comfortable. Getting out of that depressing asylum certainly put me in better spirits as well. Saying all of the story out loud to another person, I began to doubt myself a bit. It all sounded too unbelievable to be true. Suddenly my friend asked, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely. We both then heard the sound of shoes on hard tiling. It was coming from the hallway leading to my friend's bedroom. She got up to investigate, and I cautiously followed close behind her. Staring down the hallway, we both saw the ghostly figure of a dark, white-haired nurse. "You see what I see, right?" I asked. My friend, unable to form words, nodded. In the nurse's hands, she held a silver ice pick and hammer. Nurse Amelia just looked at me and smiled a foreboding smile. In that moment, I saw my worst fears were justified, and there was no longer any ambiguity. I knew then what her intentions were for me, and I knew that I wouldn't be rid of her. She must have heard me mention something about my diagnosis while I was living in the former asylum. She knew about my condition, and she intended to use her tools to fix it the old-fashioned way.
Our final story is called "A Customer at the Drive-Thru is Causing Me Nightmares. What Do I Do?" by Cryptid Currency. A woman came through the drive-thru a while back. Not in a vehicle or anything, just walked up to the window. Which happens sometimes. People on walks will just come up and buy something. It's even more common since we've had our dining room closed most nights. But I just can't shake this woman from my head. I didn't think she seemed out of place, not physically. Drive-thrus get all types of people. I mean, some people really stick with you because of how strange they are, like a man yelling at me because I handed his girlfriend her soda too aggressively. This woman wasn't like that. She was remarkably average. She looked middle-aged, Midwestern, a blouse on with a cross just a bit too big, and her hair straight out of the 80s. She had asked for a small vanilla shake and a small fry, paying with a crumpled-up bill. She told me to keep the change, grab the food, and walked away into the woods behind the store. But before she left, I think she kissed me. Just my hand. Not like a full kiss or anything, but her mouth grazed against my hand when I passed her the food, just for a second. And I can't get that out of my head. For all intents and purposes, she should have just been another customer in a long line of customers I serve every day. She wasn't even particularly unusual. But these past few nights, I feel like I can't sleep, like she's stuck somewhere behind my eyelids. After that night, seeing her, I began having issues. For one, I started seeing bugs on my skin. It was probably due to the lack of sleep, but I'd see them in the corner of my eyes crawling against my arm. They weren't there when I really looked and focused my eyes, they'd be gone. It always made me feel on edge. Just the thought of a bug on me makes my skin crawl. Sometimes I would find myself absent-mindedly scratching a spot that I'd seen a bug on before. It would help that skin-crawling feeling go away, at least sometimes. I think my coworkers chalked it up to addiction. A lot of them had gone through it themselves and always treated me extra nice if I had a bad itching day. I thought it was sweet, even if they didn't know my real problem. I'd also been losing time, mostly when I'd work the back window away from everyone else. It would get worse at night, too. I'd find myself in the deep freezer or sweeping the floor, closing up for the night when I wouldn't even remember it was getting dark outside. I really didn't mind it much, though. Sometimes it would be nice to not have to work a full shift. Surprisingly, given my state, the general manager was talking about promoting me to shift manager. It was an exciting prospect. It means no more wearing a hat and apron, more responsibilities, but sadly, no pay raise. I'd still be happy even without a pay raise, but one of my responsibilities of the job is to inventory the downstairs freezer. Normally I wouldn't have to go there. The only thing they keep down there is frozen buns that the managers bring up to thaw daily, but soon it would be my job too. Most fast food chains don't have basements. It's entirely impractical, but since our chain replaced a family-owned company, we strangely have one. It's a large space, unfurnished, always wet, dimly lit, and somehow always has a dark shade of green. You can't turn on the light until you're at the bottom of the stairs, and even then the light comes on from one single bulb on string that barely illuminates the room. It was eerie, and I dreaded having to do inventory alone. So killing two birds with one stone, I switched to day shifts. The doctor thinks it would be best, something about my circadian rhythm being messed up or something. After switching shifts, I found that I really liked it. Opening early in the morning has a strange sort of magic to it. The quietness is peaceful, and the sun always streams into the building, sometimes making little rainbows on the caked grime-covered floors. My sleep improved and the imaginary bugs went away. My arms finally get a chance to heal, now crisscrossed with bandages to keep the oozy patches contained. I felt refreshed. Even going down into the basement doesn't affect me that much anymore. Just knowing that the sun is out and shining keeps her from my thoughts. At least it had until last week when I saw her again. It had been a few months on the day shift, and I was about to leave for the night to go home, and suddenly, there she was, inside the building waiting for me at the cash register, her nails tapping against the plastic countertop. She was taller than me, domineering and frightening, staring at me unexpectedly with eyes so radiantly blue they seemed to glow. "Ma'am, our inside dining area is closed for the day, but we can help you through the drive-thru," I said.
"You aren't working nights anymore?"
Her voice was deeper than I had anticipated, fuller, scratchy, like a heavy smoker. It didn't match her physical appearance at all. Taking a closer look at her, she seemed sick, her eyes reddish, her nose running, her skin flushed a dark pink. She was shiny with sweat. "No, ma'am," I had replied. The hairs on the back of my neck bristled as she moved closer, leaning over the counter.
"I miss seeing you,"
her voice taking on a warm note, like salted caramel. I wanted to curl up in it, breathe her in. She reached her hand over the counter to place it over mine. I could feel the sweat of her palm as it lay clammy against me. I jerked it back, startled, looking down at my hand, strangely assessing it for injury. By the time I looked back up at her, she was gone, no trace left behind. I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't. She haunted me. She said she missed seeing me, and I worried that might be true. I didn't think I had seen her at all since that one night when she kissed me. Had I missed something? I tried closing my eyes, counting sheep, willing myself to sleep, but I couldn't stop the thoughts racing around my head. That and my hand itched like hell. I dreamed of the woods behind the store, dense with foliage, brush untamed, holding onto bits of paper wrapper and plastic bags. It appeared almost like the leftover remains of a meal trapped on the teeth of a wooden beast. I saw her body tucked within that maw, her skin even sicker, draped around her like melting candle wax, her eyes the lit flame. Her hair had slunk off, her eyelids hung against her cheeks. She held out a hand for me, her fingers dripping blood, flesh drooping against bone. The forest mouth seemed to open, hinging back, displaying her like a pearl in an oyster, like a red tongue in a mouth. She stepped, tree branches catching on her skin, ripping it like wet tissue paper. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but in ways dreams are so often, I couldn't move. I felt her get closer. I could feel that horrible sensation, my skin rebelling against me, itching. She stood a mere foot away from me, grabbing at her own melting visage, shifting it, molding it like warm putty. Finally, she lifted it back, moving it almost like taking off a hood, revealing her face. I woke. Morning shifts got worse. My sleep schedule got thrown off again. I started itching, seeing things in the corner of my eyes, not just bugs anymore. My coworkers really started to worry. My doctor says I need medication, but it takes weeks to start being effective. I don't know how long I can keep going like this. I hear things now too. I hear her in the basement. She whispers to me. She wants me to come back at night, to stay until sunset. She says she has wonderful things to show me. The bugs aren't on my skin anymore. They're in it. I can feel them moving, separating skin from flesh. As much as I scratch, I can't seem to get them out. My arms are a landscape of open wounds, scabs, and raw tissue. I've been trying to wear long sleeves, but I can't stop pulling them up to itch. Customers have started treating me with disgust. I was pulled aside today by the general manager. They're thinking about firing me if I don't get any help. I can't explain that I'm beyond help, and she has me. I am hers now. My coworkers say there used to be a woman that would come up to the window each night once I switched to day shift and ask if I was there. She stopped coming. My coworkers don't know what happened to her, but I do. She's in the building, tucked under the stairs of the basement, waiting for me to stay just long enough for the sun to set. I can see her down there every morning, peeking at me while I count the number of rye loaves and burger buns. The coworkers think we have a mouse infestation, some that keeps eating our leftover cookies and frosted turnovers. But I know the truth. She just has a sweet tooth. It's getting colder outside. I know she can't get me in the sun, but the days are getting shorter. One day I'm gonna have to leave too late, and I know she'll have me. She showed me what she really looked like today when she takes off her skin. In my dream, I never saw it, but right before I left for the day, I went down there, rolling her a chunk of raw cookie dough from the freezer. I don't want her contaminating the customer's food while searching for a sweet treat. She pawed almost into the light, reaching for the dough, and I saw her fleshless hand.
"Turn off the lights, love,"
she whispered to me. I shook my head, my resolve weakening. She came out into the light, further her eyes glowing cat-like in the darkness.
"I want you to see me,"
she whispered. Despite myself, I switched off the basement lights. The room went dark, inky black. She emerged from her den behind the stairs, and I saw her horrible, tremendous self. A display from a Gray's Anatomy book, muscles, tendons, ligaments on full display. I see her, even writing this now, her eyes eternally open, blood pooling around her feet, her flesh tender. She holds open her arms toward me like a lover. She says she wants me. I am her chosen. She won't leave without me. I can feel my skin pull from me, flesh yearning from escape from its prison. It wants her too. I don't know how much longer I can resist. I let her touch me in that basement, just my hand. She kissed it again, purposefully this time. I can feel my tissue peel away, like a hangnail that doesn't stop, a whole finger unsheathed from its flesh. I type with it now. Every nerve ending feels born again, sensations free of the dulling of skin. I think I'll go back tonight, let her run her hands against me, and feel as my skin slides free, born anew. Alright everyone, that's it for this episode of Stories with a Twang. I would like to give a giant thank you to all 4 of these incredible authors that let me read their stories for my 100th episode. It really means a lot. I would also like to give a thank you to Elizabethisafraid for coming on the show. I know I can always count on them for a little extra help. I would also like to thank all of you who have listened for 100 episodes, and I can't wait to do 100 more. If you have any stories you would like me to read on the show, you can send them on over to storieswithatwang@gmail.com. The show is on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Stories with a Twang Podcast. You know it would mean an awful lot if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to share with your friends and family as well. It could really help the show grow. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and until next time, remember that a little twang goes a long way.